There are so many changes in these forms right now, so we're going to try to get through them as quickly as we can. So, Lance, start
a warning for everybody. This document contains blanks, and they need something in them, even if it's only a line through the middle. There are people around here on screen in the back of the room with them. Really appreciate that.
You're welcome, staff.
Yeah. If you leave something without anything in it, the first thought is, oh, they missed it. Okay? So you can put NA, you can put a dash through it, whatever, but don't leave blanks. It looks poorly on you and poorly on our director of education. So anyway.
Let me back up just a minute. There will be some people who are off screen that are staff, so they're not going to get CE for this anyway. Those of you in the room, please put your phones on stun. Please close your computers because we're all paper. And like I said, there's 1 hour and we've got a ton of stuff. So we need your full attention. If your phone goes off in the middle of class, we would appreciate a $50 donation to RPAC. Okay. Yeah, that is cheap. But,
okay. Anyway, okay. So I am part of it, but a small part. But I want to give kudos to the DMAAR forms group. There are actually 10 in the room, 8 members, and then a chair and a scribe, as he would call it. But we've spent the last 5 months trying to bring this up to date, trying to get things. We started it before we even realized that there was going to be this inspector change that we'll go over here in a little bit. And so we were able to incorporate that in kind of almost at the last minute, to get it done. So the only thing when we sent this to Bill Sarangeli and his team, the only item that he changed on this was in the definitions part at the very top. And we had in the definitions, we had agent defined. And he said, yeah, you don't want to be defined because that would lead to have people thinking that you're part of. And we are not part of. And so he took us out. That's not a bad point to remember. You aren't part of the transaction. It isn't anything there for you to be emotional about. You have no stake in the transaction. So if you start saying I, stop. There is no I. It's them. Buyer, seller, you are not part of it. Don't get all emotional like, well, then she said this and then this happened and blah, blah, and I'm like, why do you care? It has no bearing on your life. So take the emotion out, put the professionalism in. That is why people hire you. Okay. So we start with the agency agreement. We all know what that is. We brought calculating time periods to the front of the document. Apparently, a lot of people couldn't find it on page 4. So we brought it up there. It is not changed. It's still business days. Does everybody understand business days? Is there anybody wants a little refresher on that? We sometimes need that. So we have that. Then we have the information of buyer, seller, all of that, the purchase price. We do have the voidable option that's still there if earnest money is not delivered. And then you see a little tiny red H. We did add one thing to the financing structure. So new mortgage is normal. We did install property address on the top of every page. So if you're like me, you wouldn't mix up your pages with somebody else or some other offer that's sitting on your desk. So we have that in there. And then the assumption, which there's 2 financing addendums for the assumption for contract. So one or the other, we have financing addendums for each of those. And then we get to cash. We started making little changes there because cash started being something that people didn't understand. Because in the mindset, especially of buyers and sellers, when you say cash, they think boom, instant, done, over. That isn't the case. If you're paying cash from the proceeds of the house that you haven't sold yet, you need to say so. Even though you have it in the body where it says subject to sale, subject to closing, you still have to say that's where the cash is coming from, so that there's no confusion. So we put in there, the agreement is or is not subject to the cash. Okay, so if it's not subject to it, that means that you have it, it's available, it's right there at your fingertips. You, in fact, still should prepare to show proof of that cash, even if it's sitting in a bank account or if it's in a stock investment account, or you're borrowing against your life insurance, or you're getting a HELOC, whatever it is, that information is germane to the seller and what's going on in their time frame and the risk of taking your offer. Because as soon as you go from cash in the bank and it's not contingent upon you getting it, after that, it starts adding risk to the transaction and on where the money's coming from, all that stuff.
So what source of funds you could put investment account?
You could put the, stock investment account,
Something
that
vague, you have to put like Charles Schwab.
No, you're gonna be required to show something.
Yeah,
Anyway,
to do
so,
proof. Okay.
yeah, it's just to give people the idea. And then underneath talks about commitment, not commitment, and that you need to find some acceptable verification of those funds. Okay. So, and the seller's going to have a little bit of leeway on that acceptability. I mean, it needs to show that there's money there and it's available. Okay. And then they can also say, yep, if you don't get it in there, they can give you 5 days and everything goes null and void. Want to jump in, Amy, or you?
Sure, I'll jump in.
Okay.
So we also put in other financing terms. That could be anything. It could be if you need to put more information under cash, a source of funds is at Millie and at Millie needs to do something, or maybe it's a combination. That's just available for you. And it is in our current one. Subject to appraisal is in our current purchase agreement as well. We did add back in buyer's insurance, that buyer's insurance clause. It was in the version many versions ago, and insurance hadn't been a problem. And then it became a problem after derecho and flooding and all of the issues that we've had. It's been a clause. We've had it as a clause in Dotloop for quite some time, but the group thought it would be important to have that right in our general purchase agreement. So buyer's insurance, it says this agreement is conditioned upon buyer obtaining a homeowner's or property insurance binder on the property within so many days of acceptance. So we did have question as to what would be a reasonable amount of time. The general consensus was probably the same amount of time you'd put in for a home inspection would give you enough time to find an insurance policy that would work, an insurance binder. So then we got subject to closing, which we've had in our previous one. Subject to sale has the red H in front of it just because now it's one more contingency that we didn't have before, but it's still the same subject to sale. It would be subject to the subject to sale addendum. That's a little repetitive. Home warranty, exactly the same as what we had before. Do you want me to cover compensation, or do you want to do that? Okay. Compensation is now inside the purchase agreement instead of an addendum. This is where everybody says, yay.
Oh, so we don't need to do broker to broker compensation.
No, no, there is no additional compensation addendum. It's right in here.
Right.
Yes, the purchase agreement is now 7 pages, but now you don't have to do that extra addendum either. And we didn't mention it, but the font has increased so you can read it so much more easily. I know it makes it better. When you turn 40, you'll understand that. So the compensation, the language is just the same as we had it before. Seller either directly or through their listing broker agrees to pay buyer broker compensation of whatever % of final purchase price or a dollar amount to selling broker for buyer. Or seller is not being asked to pay buyer broker compensation. So it just keeps it very, very clear as to whether or not the buyer is asking for that concession from the seller. And the rest of it is the agreement does not interfere with the seller or buyer obligation to pay additional compensation to their respective brokerage in accordance with their brokerage agreement.
What about negotiable? That was one of the, remember? What you
This is where you're
You're
negotiating.
negotiating, this is the
That's-
purchase agreement.
That's the listing.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
sorry.
Is anybody else willing to admit that they've written an offer and sent it over and not sent the addendum for commission?
Some other broker said it's not needed, it's in the purchase.
Well, it's in the purchase
Yeah,
agreement,
yeah, yeah.
but this is the
Okay.
first time it's in the purchase agreement.
Well, you can put it in there if you want.
You could have done
Yeah,
that.
we could have done that. Yeah,
What we found was there were some people putting it in there over the top of something.
Gotcha.
yeah.
That is against the rules. So always understand,
Yeah.
always understand that this purchase agreement is common. It's designed to be common to all the brokerages out there. The problem is that when it says on the top of it that it is a DMAR approved purchase agreement, if you cover something up, it's not approved anymore. Okay? So you've got a purchase agreement that is not. And if it comes to you and something's covered up, you see the DMAR logo on there, you're like, okay, great. And so you start looking at it as if you know what it says. If somebody had boxed over the top of something, you might not know. And so you're now dealing with a purchase agreement that's not common. So we don't want that. So you can line through anything. You can add pretty much anything, although other provisions is the preferred place to add something. And we put a couple of extra lines in there for that,
Yes.
but don't cover anything up. There, you don't have the ability, actually.
Want to do closing?
Yes.
104?
So, yeah, funds, talk about funds a little bit, just all that says is any money that comes into you is applied to the transaction. So it's just a clarity thing. And the closing is now on or before. That is a one word big change. It's on or before. So now you are going to be required that if in fact it's going to be after, it's going to delay a couple of days, whatever, you have to write an addendum for that delay. Have to.
Amendment.
I'm sorry, an amendment. You have to make that change prior to it expiring. Most of the times lenders are asking for that even the way we have it now. They're like, oh, if it's going to be past that date that you have written down, we want something that says so. But it's a big change. We now are conforming to every other place in the state uses on or before. So we have that. And then possession, the same, the homeowners association, we just added if this agreement so that people understood. And if you're doing an HOA addendum, it shows that it's supposed to be attached by checking that box. New construction, it is the same statement using different words. So there's nothing new in it. It's just worded more clear, worded better. So we went through and wordsmithed all that, so it made more sense. The rental property, same thing. We put a box on it for C, rental addendum. So if you were including that, you check that box to make sure that it gets looked at. If we have included property, we didn't make any changes to that. We thought it's probably as clear as it's going to get. There's always something. There's always something. But the clarity still, it's hung pretty good. We have other included items and we have excluded property. Just as a reminder on other included items, if there's been a set of appliances in the listing and they say, you know, stove, dishwasher, refrigerator, are all included in the sale, and you go in and decide other included items, and you want to put washer and dryer, you now excluded the other appliances if you don't put them on there. Everybody understand that?
And if you do a bill of sale and put them all on there, you're fine.
If you do a bill of sale, which is wonderful, because that takes it out of the transaction. But I'm just warning people that the listing said, you know, all the appliances included, and you're like, well, they'd like to have the washer and dryer too. When you, in the contract, negotiate those appliances, you negotiate all appliances. So by putting washer and dryer, you then said, that's all we want. Now you could put per listing agreement or per MLS and washer and dryer. So you can do that, but just have an awareness that you can get yourself and your client in trouble for not doing that.
And the same thing applies if it's on the seller disclosure. So that if they put, some of the seller disclosures that you see will have, list all the appliances in there as well. That's the same thing for that.
Okay.
To just list all of them. Like,
Yes, you can list them all out.
Yeah, just put
That
like
would, there's no question as to what's being included.
anything that's not in the lines above that you're asking for or expect to stay. And it gets down to all kinds of things. I mean, shelving in garages and basements is always a stickler. How that's done, and people somehow they manage to figure out that the shed in the backyard doesn't stay per the agreement because it's not in the ground. It's just on a frame. You know, so clarity is huge. Just if there's any doubt whatsoever, write it down, put it in there. Then we don't have issues to worry about. Then we have it was always personal property had to be taken out, but we put personal or rented property. So if somebody's got a rented water softener, it is the seller's obligation to make sure that gets taken out if the buyer is not going to continue with the service. The same thing with like a propane tank or whatever it might be. You need to deal with it. Okay. And then, like I said, additional provisions, we managed to squeeze a couple more lines in there. That is the preferred location or other things that you're doing or asking for or whatever. That's where you need to have those extra things. In financing, you have the other financing line where if you're asking for something to be done there. So it just gives you a little bit more room. He got asked yesterday what happened to the line that says, the compliance. That is ours and will be on our documents, but it's not generally on the DMAAR document. Because everybody either charges, well, most everybody charges different. I think I don't know if there's anybody here that's not charging the fee anymore. In Quad Cities, it's like verboten, to use that, but yeah. Oh yeah, we got told we were raping the client when we first moved to Quad Cities because we were asking for that. So, go.
All right, so under condition of property, you'll see that a line has been added. And it's that line that we added in because of line G on the lead-based paint, where it talks about buyer's agent is hereby informing the seller of the seller's obligations under 42 USC 4852D and is aware of his or her responsibility to ensure compliance. So that's that line G on the lead-based paint form that says that the buyer's agent has informed the seller. This is how we're informing the seller, and we've got it now hard-coded into the purchase agreement so you can comfortably sign line G on the lead-based paint if that's applicable. So now we get into inspections of the property, and you'll see that there are a lot of changes on this one. So I'll start out with the overview of it. You'll notice that we're back to just two options. Option number one is that there is going to be an inspection. Option number two is that as is, no inspection. So when we go back to one, if there is an inspection, there are two options, A and B, with that inspection. Option A is that the buyer is doing the inspection for their knowledge only And at the end of the inspection, they're either in or out. They're not going to ask the seller for any repairs. They can cancel the agreement or they can stay in because they're comfortable with what they've learned. B is the traditional inspection clause that we've had for forever, basically, where the inspection can be done. And then if the buyer is going to request some repairs, they have to submit a request to the seller specifying any corrections they're requesting based on findings. I think it's important to note that it says corrections. The old one said deficiencies. So this way it is very clear how the buyer wants a particular item corrected, and then the seller can decide whether or not they're going to comply with that. Then the seller has up to 3 days to respond in writing, stating if any of the requested corrections they agree to address. So it used to be 3 days and 2 days. So the seller had 3 days to respond, and then the buyer had 2 days to respond. We thought it's best to keep things consistent. So now it's 3 and 3. Remember, those are days as defined under line 14. So if it starts on Friday, that means they have until 11:59 on Tuesday, unless there's a holiday that falls in there, to respond. Now, if it's from Friday, it would be Wednesday at 11:59. Because day one is tomorrow, and if tomorrow's a weekend, now it's not till Monday.
Day one's tomorrow.
Yes.
No matter what time it happens.
Right, day one is tomorrow. Let's see. So with that, if you look over at the inspection addendum, which is that little 2-pager, the property inspection addendum has a lot of red on it as well, but that's because it responds exactly to what we have in the purchase agreement. So they both state that the buyer may at their sole expense have a full home inspection by a home inspector qualified under Iowa law. So if you haven't heard, we now have, as of July 1st, home inspectors have to be qualified under Iowa law. It does not permit the buyer from obtaining professional opinions on specific systems attached to the property. So that's like bringing in an HVAC person, a plumber, an electrician. The purpose is to determine if there are deficiencies existing at the property which would constitute a hazard to any occupant of the property, or any major structural, mechanical, environmental, including radon, gas, or fungal, roof, plumbing, electrical, siding, lead-based paint not previously disclosed in writing. The seller shall have the right upon request to receive without charge a copy of the home inspection report from the person for whom it was prepared.
Okay,
Question,
that's a lot of stuff.
because it is a
Copy
lot,
of the whole report? Or
Yeah.
just the whole report?
the whole report.
Someone calls and said, send me the report.
But therefore, then you as listing agent then have to redo your seller disclosure.
That
You
depends
have
on
knowledge.
what's in the report.
What?
That
Right.
depends on
But
what's
like
in
you
the
mad,
report.
but what if it's Ding-a-ling Dave, home inspector, who says you have a shitty roof and you,
Well,
then you have to say you have a shitty roof because he says you do?
no, you can prove otherwise, but, we're going to deal with that now. One of the things is that the idea of the whole law was to upgrade the inspectors. So it is now against the law for a person to put themselves out as a home inspector and provide a whole house inspection report unless they have certified nationally, they have E&O insurance, they take continuing ed. So all those things have to happen. And the E&O is huge because before it was like, I'll refund you the cost of the inspection. That was the whole liability that the inspector had. So they could be a complete screw up, like you said, and their biggest liability would be refunding the $350 or $400 for the inspection that they were charged. Now, in fact, they have to cover it with E&O. So if they screw something up based on their certifications and they don't do something right, there's some liability associated with that. So we're going to have to start looking at, can your inspectors, because I know you all have multiples, will they get the certifications? This starts July 1st. And Martha, you were saying that you talked to a home inspector and they're like,
I've been doing it 10 years.
I have no idea what the hell
I
you're
use
talking
him,
about.
Rick Wanamaker uses him a ton, and he's like, what? I mean, he's a member of ASHI and all that, but he said, we had no idea. Cause they, you know, they're on their own, and these are like the one guys, and they're good at it, but
Well,
I sent them
hopefully-
all the stuff.
Hopefully through their certifications, their national certifications, they will start bringing some of that information and saying, listen, you got to step up to the plate.
But it should weed out the.
Yeah, it
Uncle
should.
Larry, so
It should. Now, we had the big discussion yesterday of, you know, your cousin is a home builder and they want to come in and take a look. And so that's all fine and well. You can have anybody you want take a look, but they can't prepare a home inspection report. And if you submit information to a seller and they go, send me that home inspection report, and you don't have it, the seller can go, where did this information come from? You're telling me something's wrong and I got nothing that shows that.
So if you have a report, if you get a report from someone who's not certified and ends up being kind of a fraud, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
Can you as listing agent then disregard the entire thing?
Well, you can say
Because he's not
they're not certified to do this. In fact, it's a misdemeanor. The first time they do it, it's a misdemeanor. The second time they do it, it's a serious misdemeanor. So they're not playing. This is for real.
Wow.
This is for real.
Yeah.
So those inspectors need to get on it. The other thing is, like, if the inspector says, I think there's some roof issues out there, that you have nothing at that point. You have a suspicion, you know. So as a buyer, you can do two things. One, I would want my roofer to come out and take a look, you know, and then you've got the professional report that says, yes, in fact, it's bad. At the minimum, you could ask the seller to do it, but as a seller, I'm like, show me something's wrong. I don't think anything's wrong with it.
Right.
So if you can't show it, why would I do anything about it? And this will be interesting as this moves forward on who does what and who says and who requires different things, because it'll take a little while to sort this all out. So it's going to get interesting.
So if I ask my uncle who is a roofer, come check this out, he said, yeah, this roof is bad.
If he's a certified roofing person,
Or say an uncle that used to frame houses.
Yep.
He says, hey, this is bad. As a
Yep.
seller, I can't, or as a buyer, I can't say, hey.
well, you can have him come take a look for your benefit.
Yeah, but his word carries, his opinion carries nothing.
Unless the agent doesn't ask.
Well-
So it's on listing agents to ask for verification, correct?
Well, that's what.
Certainly.
I think that, right,
You're
That's probably what
certainly
I'd ask
right.
for.
I
is
mean,
if-
someone,
Yeah.
you should.
We don't have to ask either certification.
What happens with all this is it goes back to the misnomer that as soon as an inspector says, I think there might be a problem, that you have to go in and change the seller's disclosure. You don't have knowledge. You don't have knowledge that something's bad. You have the knowledge that an inspector look at it and thinks there might be. The seller's disclosure says actual knowledge. You didn't gain actual knowledge off of somebody saying, I think maybe the roof's bad.
It's like.
Should have a
that
roof
woman.
look at it.
Wait a minute. So, but you read about it,
Read about what?
that the stairs are broken or something.
Well, if you can prove an actual,
Okay,
but how many of those, the inspectors, they just throw shit out to cover their butts.
right.
And so then I'm not gonna go change my seller's disclosure on your CYA stuff. But if you can visually, you say there's a double tap in the breaker box. Okay. Hey, that's a visible thing you can see. Of course, hopefully the inspector's smart enough to know that there are some breaker boxes that are designed for double taps. So, because we've seen that before, So it's going to hopefully upgrade the inspections, the inspection reports, the inspectors themselves, and the responses that we have. We're long into the inspections being the reason somebody should cancel and walk away.
I agree with a lot of the stuff. I just want to know where you see potentially additional liability on us.
We're
The
not,
disclosure,
the only thing that we can find that could be is if you recommended an inspector that was not certified correct. Okay, so your recommendations, you better be very, very, very clear on that person has everything they need. And that is a selling point, saying, that they've got errors and omissions, they're certified nationally, they go take CE classes, blah, blah, blah. That's all done.
what if that guy screws up?
Huh?
What if that guy screws up? Do we have?
Well, now he
anybody-
has E&O insurance.
So we're not liable
Yeah,
because we
he's-
recommended.
Well, you shouldn't be, but you know who's liable in every problem in a transaction.
I'm
As
not
soon
gonna
as you
say
talk to
that.
an attorney, we're all liable
Yeah.
because we have E&O. This might help a little because the home inspector's got E&O. But attorneys just across the board, you walk in, say, I have a problem with real estate. And the first thing they ask is, what's the agent's name and brokerage? Because those are the first two that are going on.
And I was always taught, give them like 3 or 4 inspectors and then they study.
It is
that.
best.
So I
That is
don't
best.
say use.
We're a
this.
little up in the air right now because there's no repository of inspectors that are certified and correct with the law. The only thing we have is that they cannot, by law, provide that report if they're not.
And I think it's a great idea to send this, Senate File 460. You just scan it in, send it to your home inspector and ask them if they meet all of the requirements. So at the very least, they've attested to you that they've met the requirements and you're going by their word.
So this is, it's a very, a very strong law, even though it's just misdemeanors. Nobody wants, and you certainly don't want to get the second one and have a serious misdemeanor.
So I have 2 things I want to jump
Yes,
in with it.
please.
One other thing with the home inspector is they cannot be someone who provides repair services for what they're inspecting. So they can't do any of those kind of repairs within 12 months. So that may take out a number of the, I don't want to call them fly by night, but the not as professional or the nationally certified ones, because the ones who are ASHI and InterNACHI, that's part of their thing is they can't do repairs. Other than it does exclude termite and radon. So someone who inspects for termite and radon can also do repairs as a home inspector. And then the second thing I wanted to mention about updating seller disclosures in the middle of a transaction. Just don't do it. Not in the middle of a transaction. If the transaction falls apart, yes, there is the possibility that the seller disclosure may need to be updated. The problem with updating it in the middle of a transaction is when you do that and submit it to the buyer now has either 3 to 5 days that they can cancel the transaction for no reason whatsoever.
But what if they got water in the basement during that time?
Send them an email.
Yeah, disclosure is fine.
Yeah,
You
disclosure is
should.
required. The update of the seller disclosure is not required, and we're recommending against it because that does give them an out
Not required in the middle of a
in the middle of
transaction.
a transaction.
It is required for a new buyer that at the end of a transaction, there is nothing in the law that says it has to be updated during a transaction. Most times what you're going to find out is information from the buyer anyway. And they're like, well, there's this, or there's this, or there's this. They know that you don't got to disclose anything. And there is no rule to change it. And that's a trick. And I know a few people that have used that where they push on the listing agent and say, you got to get that changed in there. My buyers want that changed on there. And the reason they're doing that is because they're going to cancel the second you change it and give it to them. It's another way that we try to practice law and get our buyers out of transactions when we should never, ever participate in that discussion. Ever. That's just, you're being an attorney. As soon as they say, why, I don't want to buy this anymore. Can you get me out? And you go, and anything you say now has just come from the as a person, like as an attorney. The second you are asked that question, how to cancel a transaction, your only response is, number one, you can call an attorney, have them take a look at this. Number two, I'm able to write a cancellation for you. What do you want me to put down as the cause?
You want to jump in, page 5, 203?
Oh, sure. Why not? Okay, so then we go to, the inspection of the sewage disposal. The red acceptance is this, that we went through the purchase agreement and tried to make everything that is common use the same wording to try to make it more understandable and make it better for you. So same thing, it's the, scheduled and paid for by buyer, seller, or somebody else. And you go from there. In the duties of the parties, the same thing as we go forward. The survey, if they want, we changed and made acceptance in there. The wood destroying pest inspection, really not a big deal. We put that the property shall be inspected. The biggest change, and we didn't get it read for some reason, is that now it can be paid for by buyer, seller, or other person. Okay, so it's not auto seller anymore. The reason for that is that lenders, a lot of lenders don't care whether or not it's inspected for termites or not. They literally don't care. It has no bearing on it. And so if they're not asking for it and you as a buyer want to be as competitive as possible, maybe you offer to pay for it, or maybe you don't do anything at all with it and you just go on, about your business. So
What if you're like a 14th floor condo? You don't even want to do it. You just cross it off and not do a pest inspection?
of course,
Yeah.
that's that line through.
That's
If people know in a large paragraph, you line through the top line, you line through the very bottom line, and you connect from the right end to the left end. That wipes the whole thing out. You don't have to scribble it all out. You can just,
I didn't know.
yeah, you do the top line across to the end of the sentence, the bottom line to the end of the sentence, and then the right upper one, you connect with an angled line to the lower one. It eliminates the whole paragraph without destroying it.
They still requiring dead termites to be treated though within like 5 years?
It just depends on who. Whether or not it gets treated is up to whether or not, like for FHA, VA, those government, they're all going to require it. They require it. But conventionals, a lot of them don't. So they'll do it. And the same thing with the government is if there's any sign of termites, there has to be some type of structural done. So you have to get somebody. to look
And
at it.
so then if there's termites and it's a $10,000 bill, you just have to negotiate with it.
Well, you had to negotiate through it anyway. We didn't change that. Where we put in was an option for the buyer to pay.
Super fun.
So yeah, so it just kind of depends. None of the other wording got checked. We did add if that box is checked, that the buyer knows that it's new construction, they're not requiring a termite inspection of it. Because anybody that works with a builder knows builders hate that they have the property termite inspected. So that goes away. So you don't have to do that unless again you're FHA, VA or something like that. Same thing, abstract and title, that's all the same. Property taxes did not change, and joint tenancy did not change.
Neither did special assessments.
That's true.
That's at the top of page 5. Special assessments didn't change. On line 262, there's homeowners or property insurance. It does change it up a little bit. It says seller shall bear a risk of loss or damage to the property prior to closing or possession. That's all the same. Buyer may purchase additional insurance.
Does everybody know why a buyer might consider purchasing additional insurance on the property?
Prior to closing.
Yeah. Like as soon as the offer's signed, there's people who will buy some insurance on the property. Why? Because when they sign an agreement to purchase the property, they gain an equity right in that property. So if the house has replacement value on it, they want to make sure that they're in it. They have a gap there of value. Maybe you did a good job and you bought it right. you've got an equity position that you want to protect. So, I mean, everybody here sold the house that went for less money than it should have. It's $5,000, $8,000, $10,000 worth of value that wasn't shown in the purchase agreement, but you know, as the buyer's agent, you're like, man, you just don't let that. Don't you want to protect that valuation? So that's why.
And the rest of that talks about if there is substantial damage or destruction occurs, how that works. It gives them the option to work through it, to get the property back up to where it needs to be, or to have that insurance money go to the buyer who can then take care of the damage. Court approval, what was added in there, just a little bit change in the verbiage, was that the agreement is contingent upon court approval unless the will provides authority. So that just helped to further define what it is in a state situation. Doc prep still the same, general provisions the same, notice is the same. Remedies of the party. What did we change up in remedies of the party?
We got rid of the thing that cited the law that didn't pertain to the remedies of the party. I don't know what it was, but you looked it up
Yeah,
and you're
that's
like,
right.
this has got nothing to do with the contract law. It's zero. And we've been for years signing with that law number cited, and it's nothing.
Yeah.
So that was a catch.
Nobody looked it up.
Oh,
Dispute resolution still in there as it has before. Just a reminder, whether or not either party signs it, it does not change the contract at all. Dispute resolution can work really well and be less expensive and quicker. But you're laughing.
Well, I was laughing because when we talked about this before, and I'm over here saying, I think it's a good thing. I think you have somewhere like a 75 or 80% chance of coming to some type of resolution at the table for a lot less money. And all of a sudden I see Shane and he's like, oh, you know how Shane does. And I'm like, what? And he goes, I'd never do that. I'm like,
I never signed it. I always
so,
thought it was
so
too.
there's another party here. I had worked with 2 attorneys when this first started coming out. I worked with 2 attorneys and both of them were happy to sign it because they know how much they charge.
But it doesn't mean much, right? Because I don't know.
Well, it's non-binding,
It's non-binding.
and both parties, even if both parties have signed, if both parties are like, no, we're going straight to court,
Yeah.
they can go straight to court.
You're not obligated to be there.
No,
Not if both parties choose not to.
Both parties.
Even if they both signed, if both parties say, nah, let's skip over that step because this is bigger than mediation.
That if there are judges that have heard this happen before, as the judges read through the material, they might go, have you guys been to dispute resolution? Because it says here you agreed to. So they might get asked that in court because the judge is like, why the hell are you here? They didn't sit down and talk yet.
And then the final walkthrough, hopefully you're using the final walkthrough form as you are doing final walkthroughs and then using the form and having your buyers sign off on that. That form is in, it's called final walkthrough.
what do you do on it?
So it just confirms that the buyer is good with it.
Okay, I
Yeah.
just did one
Isn't that
last
what
night.
code is
Huh.
for?
I just say,
Well,
okay.
but they walk in and they're like, well, but this is wrong.
But if everything's groovy. Still do
It's
it?
good to get a
Oh my
signature
God, I
that
had
says
no
that
idea.
everything's good.
There's a
Everybody's
spot out there
telling me
that
it's
says
okay.
everything's groovy.
Yep,
That's why you go to class.
Check.
Right? And it's a form in our.
yes. Oh, final walkthrough.
Holy hell.
It's just a good practice. Is it required? Absolutely not. Is it good to be able to reflect back on that if a problem comes up? Yes, it is.
Okay,
All right.
last page. We made it 7. So you know.
We have a question.
Oh,
What's the
yes.
question?
Can you as a listing agent request a final walkthrough form from the buyer's agent? I feel like that could be more protective of the seller than the buyer.
You surely can.
You can request it. They're not required to do it, but they could absolutely, the listing agent could request it.
We just send me the form.
Yeah.
Yep, say, oh,
So then they
we did-
can't come back 2 days
Yeah.
later and be
Yeah.
like, oh, now we found X,
No,
Y, and Z.
that's a great point.
And as a listing agent, maybe just send the form over to the buyer's agent and say, hey, when you do the final walkthrough, can we get a
Oh, yeah, when you
signature?
schedule it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because you know exactly when it happens.
Yeah.
That's a great idea.
So in the marketing part, we really didn't change much, except we highlighted that it needs to be, it should not be actively marketed. Because the signs are gonna stay in the yards. We don't put sold signs on forever. We used to do pending signs and nobody knew what they were, what that meant. So the signs stay in the yard, that kind of stuff, but you shouldn't be on social media. Hey, I'd love to get a different offer on this property. I'd love to do this, do that, you know, so that's not there. I just wondered if there was something. So anyway, and then the acknowledgement,
Before you go there with marketing.
yes,
So if you are an agent who uses we're going to leave it active until earnest money comes in, we're gonna leave it active until after the inspection, this would need to be stricken. So that would be a counter offer that the listing, well, it should be the seller's idea, but it's most of the time the listing agent's idea. That needs to be stricken and set back because buyer and seller have agreed that that property is not going to be actively marketed, which means it needs to show pending in the MLS within 1 business day. So just a reminder. Okay, sorry, didn't mean to interrupt.
that's the most common place I hear
Yes,
is I never take it off the market until this. I never do this until that. And it's like, what's I got to do with anything? It's the seller.
yes.
It's always the seller. Well,
Do you mean to strike it off? Put it in pending status? Or not to strike off until it is pending?
So you would strike this before it's accepted, because that would be the seller telling the buyer, I'll accept your offer, but I'm going to continue to market it. So the buyer has to agree to that as well. So
in the subject to sale, that's in the addendum. It's in the subject sale addendum, so you don't have to. Okay? So the acknowledgement, there's no change there, but some people wonder why in the hell have we got initials stuck up there? The reason is because we live in a world of digital signing. And what was happening is it was flying right past the acknowledgement that you have the rights and in fact, the suggestion to contact an attorney. Because it's a legal binding document. And so it was flying right past there to the bottom signature and nobody ever noticed that that was there. So that was the last time that we did it. We put initials there. So when they're like, you know, signed and, you know, the sheet goes to a signature, to an initial, this makes it stop so that the people can actually see that they're signing an agreement that's legally binding and they should do stuff. Then we have the acceptance time. And then we get to the fun stuff because we now have where the buyer is purchasing or making an offer to purchase on the property. And they do all of that and then they sign. And then we have a box and the box is for the seller. It's pulled out, it's made so it's easily understandable. You can accept it as a seller, you can counter it as a seller, or you can reject it as a seller. And whatever box you check, you sign, it's done. Okay, that's it.
So we can still verbally counter like we do, and when we come to terms, do one. We don't have to
Well,
put it in writing each time we do it, blah, 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 blah,
Yeah,
blah.
the quick verbal counters, I understand that it's a matter of business and stuff. But if in fact you're in a verbal counter and they're like, yeah, that sounds great, and they get another offer, don't come to me and won't. Because you don't got nothing. You got an agreement verbally that they're going to accept exactly what you talked about. Hell yeah, let's get that done. Get it sent over. The next thing you do, you get a phone call and it's like, somebody else called, we got another offer and theirs is better than yours, so see ya. And of course, you've already told the buyer how wonderful it is that they just bought out.
I know, but then some agents sit on it and don't get back, even if you put it in writing. I know, but what do you do?
Exactly.
The counter one was put in there because there was a lot of question because the counter offer form is used apparently pretty frequently from what we're finding out. And so the question kept being, do they only sign the counter offer form or do they sign the purchase agreement and the counter offer form? The way this is written, it would be check marking counter, signing the purchase agreement, and then there's also a signature line on the counter offer.
Yeah, before there was just box you.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, so clarity is really one of the main things we were looking for in this. So this is also a reminder that the seller needs to sign a rejection, and that needs to be delivered as soon as practicable. That's our ethical obligation as realtors and members of the National Association of Realtors to have our buyers or our sellers sign that, and to inform that buyer or buyer's agent that their offer's been rejected.
Yeah.
Well, it
that-
proves that it was presented as well.
That's where that all came from. No, yes.
Right.
That's all right.
So the counter offer, if the seller is going to check the counter offer box, they initial and sign each page, and then all the changes are made on the counter offer form. Nothing is stricken out and initially
Yeah.
on the.
I always worried about that. So if it wasn't a whole bunch of stuff, I liked it on the original, but that was just just the way I did it. You know, you can do it either way, but if it's just like a price change, I want it right there. You know,
Yeah,
I just
okay.
cross through for the new
And we
price.
can just
and
say
it's-
it like,
Yeah.
closing costs will be blank. blah,
Yeah,
blah,
you
blah,
know,
blah,
so,
blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so, you know, you do it whatever way works best for you. But if you go back and forth and next thing you know, you have like 4 cross outs of the price, you've seen it go across the page, you know?
Yeah.
So maybe at some point it's time to write a counter offer, clear it up a little bit. So questions, you guys have been
That's
really
good.
good about stuff, but I mean, there's some implications with this and how you do business and what you do and stuff like that. So,
It's easier to explain this to a client, so I appreciate it.
oh, good.
Good.
Thank
It's
you.
more clear, it's more, it's well done. I think,
We tried to go for a logical order.
but thanks for the bigger pie.
Yeah, no kidding.
How about our friends online? Do you guys have questions? Seeing a lot of no's.
Well,
Apparently we explained better in the second class than we did in the first class.
but yeah, anything you have, you know, that you're dealing with, thinking about with regard to purchases and back and forth and all that stuff. I mean, ask the question and it may benefit somebody else that's in it.
I feel like there's maybe 3 or 4 inspectors that would fall into this category, which means maybe we need more time on our, like, it's not gonna be as easy to get. I mean,
It might be, yeah.
Yeah.
It might
there's
be.
not very many that fall in
July
this
1.
category that I know of.
Do you think they'll make it 2 days at some point?
I
I mean,
would-
does it make sense if they're requiring it?
I doubt that the state is going to pay for that.
Yeah.
But we could, as a brokerage, create a little list
Oh,
of
that
people
would
we
be
know
nice.
who are certified. and
Maybe.
just have
I would
laundry
still
list.
confirm it.
We still have that of, you know, did you take your CE classes and pay your, you know, each
Oh,
year?
Yeah.
So we're very, very litigious,
Yeah.
Right,
you know, business that we're in.
So this can start to be used July 1st. It will be in dot loop with all of the versions that have the broker fee on it. July 1st, along with,
Fingers crossed.
well, fingers crossed, along with I'm looking at Megan right now. And she's like, can we do it?
Yeah, everybody stare at Megan right now.
Yes. And we'll have the counter offer, the inspection addendum, and I feel like there was one other. So those will all be new. So if you do your own folders, make sure that you update those, because those will not automatically be updated if you've created a personal folder. You have to go in and replace those.